Here, in this world, you work hard, you put money in the bank, you go to Hawaii, and when you're in Hawaii, there's no rules. You just enjoy yourself, and then when you have to leave, when the money is gone, then you have to leave, and you have to come back to your working existence. So similarly, we collect a certain amount of punya, which allows us to go to heaven for 10 or 20 or 30,000 years, and when we're in heaven, we're just enjoying. It's our vacation. And so there's no rules, you don't get old, you don't get sick, you don't get pregnant, you just, babies manifest, you have relations with any woman or man that you want, there's no rules about relationships or any of these things. It's just a place to enjoy pleasure. You drink somras, which is thousands of times more intoxicating than LSD and all kinds of things like this. So you're there enjoying yourself and you're having a great time, and at some point the flower garland that you wear fades. And when the flower garland fades, that means your time is going to be up real soon. So then what happens is the subtle body is extracted from your heavenly body, and it's placed inside the clouds by Indra. Clouds, in the clouds. And then the rain comes down, and the jivas come down in the rain. And then they go inside the grains. And then the man eats the grains. And then the soul comes in the man's semen. And then when he has relations with the woman, the soul goes into the egg, which is what we're going to see. Here's the first picture. If a sperm cell meets and penetrates an egg, it will fertilize it. This is known as conception. Charak Samhita, when there is a cohabitation of a man having undamaged sperm and a woman having undamaged genital tract, ovum, and uterus during the opportune period, then consequently the conscious soul in the sperm, impelled by the mind, descends into the zygote and situated in the uterus, then the embryo is formed. So here you see exactly same description as being given in Charak Samhita. Srimad Bhagavatam, on the first night, the sperm and the ovum mix. Huh? Yeah, okay. After 6 days of fertilization, the embryos implant on the wall of the uterus. Shushuta Samhita. In the first month of gestation, a gelatinous substance is formed. You can see that this is a gelatinous substance in the picture. Srimad Bhagavatam, on the 5th night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. Fetal development at 4 weeks. The structures that eventually form the face and neck are becoming evident. The heart and blood vessels continue to develop, and the lungs, stomach, and liver start to develop. Shushuta Samhita, the molecules of the primary elements, Prithvi, Jala, Agni, Vayu, Akash, or earth, water, fire, air, ether, being acted upon by Kapha, Pitta, and Vata, are condensed. In the course of a month, a head is formed. Fetal development, 8 weeks. Science. The heart, neural tube, arms, legs, liver, and other major organs begin to form. The eye, ears, mouth, bones, fingers, and toes will become present. The brain and cranial nerves begin to form, and the baby's sex organs begin to become visible. Shushuta Samhita. A lump-like appearance of the gelatinous substance indicates the male sex of the embryo. An elongated-like shape denotes that the fetus is a female. But here it's saying, in its own language, what the science is saying, that the sex is being determined by the shape of the fetal tissue. Srimad Bhagavatam, at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. Very similar, again, to what we see in the scientific explanation. Fetal development, 12 weeks. Development of the heart and the major organs is complete by the end of the 3rd month. Baby's sex organs continue to develop. Still difficult to differentiate gender. Baby's muscles and trunk, limbs, and head are developing. Baby's face is well formed, and their baby looks like a baby. Shushuta Samhita. In the 3rd month, 5 lump-like protuberances appear at the places where the 5 organs, the 2 hands, 2 legs, and the head would be, and the minor limbs and members of the body are formed in the shape of extremely small papillae. Srimad Bhagavatam. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, and skin appear, as do the organ of generation and other apertures in the body, namely eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus. So you see, as it's going along, the texts are matching gradually with the scientific explanation. Fetal development, 16 weeks. The eyes can blink and the heart and blood vessels are fully formed. The fingers and toes should have fingerprints. The baby's digestive system is forming and the intestines are present. Shushuta Samhita. All the limbs and organs of the body of the embryo become more potent, and the fetus is endowed with consciousness owing to the formation of the heart. Due to the consciousness, the fetus expresses its desires for taste, etc., through the mother. So here you see, in the science, it's saying the baby's digestive system is forming and the intestines are present. And here you see in Shushuta Samhita, it says that the fetus is expressing its desires for taste through the mother. And this is why the mother starts having unusual tastes and desires. Because the baby's development is based on a combination of many, many things, which I'll discuss later when I talk about the Vata Pitta Kapha and how you develop your prakriti, or your nature at birth. So then I'll explain how that happens through the process of the conjugal act between the mother and father. Srimad Bhagavatam. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the 7 essential ingredients of the body, which are the 7 tissues, according to Ayurveda, chyle, or the ratha, the nutrient soup, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen come into existence. Fetal development, 20 weeks. The baby weighs about 9 ounces and about 6 inches long. The baby can suck a thumb, yawn, stretch, make faces. Soon the mother will feel the baby move. 17 to 19 weeks. Hearing begins. Shushuta Samhita. In the 5th month, the fetus is endowed with mind and wakes up from the sleep of its subconscious existence and becomes active. So here we see he's hearing now. He's conscious. He's not subconscious. The consciousness has come forward and he's able to hear, and he's become active. He stretches, makes faces, yawns.
Clarify something. In the happy conception of transmigration,
Yes.
where it's explained to us that the soul transmigrates carried by the subtle body.
Correct.
And yet in here, it's almost implying the mind is arriving later.
No.
Was that different mind?
It just means that the mind becomes awakened.
Okay. So it was already there.
It's there. It's just become awakened.
So it's a translation.
Yeah, this isn't, I just took this out of an Ayurvedic text. Whoever translated it may not have translated it accurately.
It's the word endow.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst make themselves felt. The baby development, 24 weeks. The baby is developing. It's beginning to create its own antibodies. Oh, the immune system is developing and is beginning to create its own antibodies. He has developed a hand grip reflex and startle reflex. His lungs are beginning to develop and alveoli are forming. He is growing and filling out. He looks more and more like the person he will be when he's born. By the way, in America, you're allowed to perform an abortion up to 24 weeks.
That's really good.
Shushuta Samhita, in the 6th month, intelligence and cognition manifest. See, endowed really means manifest. It's there. It's now manifest, and he becomes cognizant of his situation. The baby becomes more active. The more conscious he becomes, the more active he becomes, realizing he's in this confined space. At the end of 6 months, the fetus enclosed by the amnion begins to move on the right side of the mother's abdomen. That's the Srimad Bhagavatam. Here you see a picture, a surgery at 24 weeks. They did a surgery on this a baby, and here you see the baby. After the surgery was done, he takes his hand and grasps the finger of the surgeon. Can you see the picture? So it shows that the baby is very conscious, very aware. He grasps the hand, he grasps the finger of the surgeon in appreciation of the surgery that was done. Huh?
In fairness, can we say, there's a grasp reflex, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But you're just now adding on the meaning, he's shaking his hand and saying thanks.
Because in the previous text of the Shushuta Samhita, it says that the intelligence and cognition manifest at 24 weeks. He's cognizant. He's intelligent and he's cognizant.
I think that's not necessarily clear. The baby has intelligence and cognition. Is that enough to say, "Ah, thanks, doctor"?
Yeah.
You know.
On some level,
Because with newborns, of course, you can play with the grasp reflex.
Right, I understand.
There's no sense of.
Yeah,
on some level,
I agree.
it appears that he's expressing
Yeah.
something.
He wants to get out.
Yeah, exactly. Get me out of here. Fetal development, 28 weeks. Your baby's eyes are open and he's able to cry. He may be very active now, and others may be able to see his movements. He may have hiccups, which will feel like a jumping movement. His body fat increases and his bones are fully developed. Shushuta Samhita, all the limbs and members of its body are more markedly developed. The Oja, Dhatu, the consciousness in the heart of the baby, becomes completely awakened. This is where the soul lives, in the area of the heart. Srimad Bhagavatam, thus endowed with the development of consciousness from the 7th month onward, if the child is fortunate, he can remember his past 100 births.
That's fortunate.
Oh, you'll see. You're going to see. You're going to see what happens in the last pictures. The development, 32 weeks. The baby is growing and maturing and preparing for life outside the womb. The baby sleeps most of the time now and has periods of REM sleep. Baby is becoming increasingly cramped for space, but he is still very active. Rapid eye movement. Rapid eye movement. Shushuta Samhita. Due to the awakening of consciousness, the baby, feeling cramped, becomes active in the womb and does not remain silent. Srimad Bhagavatam, the child thus remains just like a bird in a cage without freedom of movement. At that time, as the child remembers all the troubles of his past 100 births, he grieves wretchedly. What is the possibility of peace of mind in that condition? Now you're going to see a picture. You see the baby, he's got his hands, he's praying. The living entity in the frightful condition of life, bound by 7 layers of material ingredients, prays with folded hands, appealing to the Lord who has put him in that condition. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:31-11. The human soul says, I take shelter in the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, who appears in his various eternal forms and walks on the surface of the world. I take shelter of him only because he can give me relief from all fear, and from him I have received this conditioned life, which is just befitting my impious activities. I, the pure soul, appearing now, bound by my activities and lying in the womb of my mother by the arrangement of Maya. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him who is also here with me, but who is unaffected and changeless. He is unlimited, and he is perceived in the repentant heart. To him I offer my respectful obeisances. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of 5 elements, and therefore my qualities of and senses are being misused, although I am essentially spiritual. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature and the living entities, because he is devoid of such a material body, and because he is always glorious in his spiritual qualities, I offer my obeisances unto him. So this is the prayer of the soul. You can see the picture in the ultrasound. The baby's got his hands together. He's praying, Krishna, please save me.
How do the atheist examples explain what they say?
About the hands?
Yeah.
Just say it's just... So that's the second presentation. So now we've discussed the ancient civilization and the ancient texts and their relationship to modern science. The next session we'll start with a discussion of Sankya as the foundation of Ayurveda and the foundation of Bhakti. Sankya from the Srimad Bhagavatam, so we'll start discussing that. So that'll be in the next session. We're now, I think, what time is it? Oh, it's 10 o'clock. I still have 15 minutes. I can answer some questions. Would anybody like to ask any questions? Yes?
How does the Indus Valley civilization relate to the Vedic culture that we know of? Because it's
Well, you see in like the symbols, they have the Brahmin cow. They have some of the other symbols. The Indus Valley script is similar to Sanskrit. You see the picture of Shiva, also of Durga, the statue of Durga. So they were worshiping Shiva and Durga. They were, in Vedic civilization, they were following those things. They had a different language, but that's not any different than, Gujarati or Bengali or Bihari or any of the other languages in which ancient cultures worshipped different devatas in the Vedic culture. So there's a connection between them.
is that where Ayurveda comes from, or how did it? What was the purpose of showing the Indus Valley in relation to the Chinese?
The reason I show the Indus Valley civilization is because of the, first of all, to show archaeological evidence of the ancientness of the Vedic culture, which corresponds with the ancientness of the Vedic, Ayurvedic and Vedic texts, okay? The earliest palm leaves that they could find of any Ayurvedic text or Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., is only about 500 BC. But the texts themselves talk about the things being written. If you look at it from the perspective that Vyasadeva took the sound vibration of Sanskrit, because it was an oral tradition up to the time of Vyasa. It was completely an oral tradition. It was spoken. And everyone understood it once, twice, maximum. The disciple remembered the verse and understood the meaning of the verse after 1 or 2 recitations of sound. But the mind in Dwapara Yuga and Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga was more responsible as well. In those yugas, if you thought of killing somebody, then you were responsible for killing someone, as if you had done it with your physical body. That's how much control you had over your mind. In Kali Yuga, you don't have that control over your mind. And so, therefore, because your mind is much weaker, the subtle body, the mind and the subtle body is much weaker, he realized, as he wrote in there, Munda Sumunda Matayo, they're very unfortunate, unlucky, lazy, and most of all, constantly disturbed. Therefore, he took the sound vibration, and this is discussed in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how the sound is made into the alphabet of Sanskrit. And so then you have the physical representation of the sounds of the vowels and consonants in the form of the Sanskrit alphabet. And so then he took that and he wrote the Vedic text, the 4 Vedas, the 18 Puranas, etc. Then he distributed them to his disciples. Now Ramaharshana, Ugrasena, he was the one who took, Ramaharshana was the one who took the 18 Puranas, okay, and the Mahabharata. And he began the discussion, the teaching of the sages in the forest. Then when Balaram came, he didn't stand up because he was sitting on the Vyasasana. So he thought, I'm sitting on the Vyasasana. All the other sages have stood up for Balaram. But I don't have to stand up because I'm considered the manifestation of God on the Vyasasana. So then Balaram came and took a kusa grass and killed Ramaharshana. So when Ramaharshana was killed, the sages said, well, okay, we understand the reason why you killed him, but we gave him benedictions. He would have a long life. He would have excellent health. And he would remember all of the Vedic literatures and be able to expound upon them perfectly so that we can understand them. So Balaram said, okay, I can't bring him back because, he deserves to die for his offense. But his son is here, Sutta Goswami. So Ramaharshana Sutta, which is another name for Sutta Goswami, I'll endow him with all the blessings that you gave to Ramaharshana. Now I'll give them to Sutta Goswami. Then Sutta Goswami went and heard Srimad Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. Then after he heard from Sukadeva Goswami, he returned to the Namacharanya, to the Yajna, the 1,000-year sacrifice, and began to expound upon Srimad Bhagavatam and the Puranas. Then after his exposition, that was being recorded on maybe, one palm leaf here and one palm leaf there. Then after 1,000 years, the sages went and took some palm leaves and distributed them to some temples. Then some copies were made from there. Then some copies were made from there. So the copies that they finally found, the oldest existing copies, which didn't fall apart in terms of palm leaves, are from 500 BC. But they were handed down over the course of the previous 2,500 years through the sacrifice and etc. So that's how we eventually got the palm leaves that we have from 500 BC. They were recorded 5,000 years ago by only one person. You had one. The chances of finding the original one that Vyasa wrote on are probably impossible. But what you found is the copy of the copy of the copy of the copy of the copy. And that's what we have from 500 BC. So I wanted to show with the Indus Valley civilization, there's archaeological evidence. We have an ancient Vedic culture. We have an ancient civilization. Shiva was worshipped. Goddess Durga was worshipped. We have ancient texts in Ayurveda which talk about modern medical science 5,000 years before medical science came about in the West. We have the Srimad Bhagavatam showing us information from modern medical science 5,000 years before the medical science came. So this basically is a setup to say, I use this like at yoga studios and stuff for new people. Here's ancient Vedic culture, and here's the ancient Vedic scriptures, and here's the evidence that they match up with modern science. And that gives people faith for what I'm about to present in terms of Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti.
Same source.
Huh?
Same source.
Yeah, same source.
But what you're also saying is that this city is like 7,000, maybe even more.
Yeah, yeah.
So therefore, the same text, although it didn't exist on palms, exists orally, so that tradition goes back even
Yeah,
further.
I'm not sure. Is it conclusive that there's definitely an ancient elaborate civilization, but to say it was a Vedic, there's a sort of grey area between saying it was a Vedic civilization and they worship Shiva.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, there is a picture. I showed you the picture of Shiva.
Well, it's a picture of somebody with horns sitting.
Huh?
I mean, it's a picture with some like this sitting there, but there's also similar images.
I'm just repeating what has been expressed by various scholars.
Okay.
According to the various scholars, like Subhash Kak, York Furewith, Dr. David Froley, and others, they say that there's a definitive link between the Indus Valley civilization and the ancient Vedic culture.
I mean, yeah.
So based on I'm just repeating what the scholars have expressed. Now, Prabhupada, Gurudev, they haven't talked about the ancient Indus Valley civilization, but I haven't got much else to show you archaeologically about the evidence of ancient civilization in India than this. Yes?
Two questions. One is this word Hindu is coming from this, and also is that related with the river Sindhu? And how did it cover this civilization? It was like a disaster?
Well, the Sindh River.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, can you repeat?
The question she wants to know about the word Hindu in relationship to all this. The Sindh River is actually a little further west of the Saraswati, the Sindh River. And in Arabic, you don't say sa, so they say ha. So that's how Sindhu became Hindu, and how it became the Hindus. You won't find the word Hindu in any of the Sanskrit texts. It's Sanatana Dharma is what it is. And that's a Vedic.
But is it connected with this Hindu value? I mean, it sounds like the same word.
Indus Valley, yes.
It's the same kind of...
Yeah. No, it's because it was called, it's connected, yeah. The Indus Valley was connected. Now, the Indus Valley, the name Indus Valley was given by the British. I don't know that it's an ancient explanation from Harappa Mohenjo-daro. They call it the Indus Valley civilization.
They could not read that language?
No one has been able to crack the code on the language. Subhash Kak said that there's some similarities in how many vowels appear in Sanskrit and how many vowels appear in that. Like certain symbols. There are symbols in there that repeat as often as certain vowels and certain consonants in Sanskrit and certain words. And so he says that there must be some connection between the two languages, but he can't decipher it completely.
Marsh,
Yeah.
just to address Alexander's question, I heard that there was some proof of the connection through the existence of the Saraswati River.
Yeah.
The Saraswati River, some archaeological evidence shows that it disexited a certain number of years ago, and it's mentioned in the ancient texts, and therefore that proves there must be a connection.
That's what Dr. David Froley.
Right.
That's where he according to archaeologists, that river dried up at a certain point.
Yeah.
And so they were saying that the river must have dried up. That's why the people abandoned the civilization, because there wasn't any water. You haven't got water, you haven't got a city. And so he found evidence in I think the Rig Veda, which shows how old that river is, and when it
But the Rig Veda is referring to the Saraswati River.
Yeah.
Then the Rig Veda must be related to that civilization.
Exactly. This is the conclusion of York Furewith and David Froley and Subhash Kak. Yeah. Yes.
I've heard that Vyasadeva is a literary incarnation of Krishna.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
That's brilliant.
And he still exists. He's in the Himalayas. Still there. Well, the story is that when Madhvacharya went with his disciple to the Himalayas, And he told his disciple, I'm going to see Vyas. And his disciple said, I want to accompany you. He said, you can't follow me. He said, why not? And he didn't say anything else. And then he started to walk. And his legs stretched from one mountaintop to another. So he was going mountaintop to mountaintop. So in 4 strides, he was like 4 mountains away. And the disciple, there's no way the disciple could follow him to that place. Prabhupada once said that there's areas of the Himalayas that we can't even see. They're in another dimension. And he said in that area, there's one Himalayan mountain which is made of solid gold. He said if the materialists would figure out how to find it, they would go mad. Yes, Kishore.
I just wanted to mention in terms of the Indus Valley and the civilization that Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions in his introduction to Krishna Samhita about the original settlers, the Aryans, and how they were descendants from the Devas, and how they actually populated that Indus Valley originally. So that culture is actually coming from the Devas, and those children, then began to populate from there as the cradle of civilization. It's a different version of the cradle of civilization.
He's explaining, Kishore Mohan, that in one book, Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes that the Devas descended from the higher planetary systems and populated the Indus Valley in human form, and gave birth to the human civilization as the cradle of civilization there in the Indus Valley. So that answers your question. Doesn't? Not satisfied? Okay, no problem. I don't like to argue with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but if you want to, you can. So, yes, Sita.
Marge, the timelines have always been a little confusing to me because this civilization is like 7,000 years old.
Yeah.
But also we know that Krishna was on this planet 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So we can extrapolate that this is like how, was the continents different at the time of Krishna? Like, I always thought that the continents changed when the yugas became Kali Yugas.
To some degree, yes, they changed.
Yeah.
Also, if you look at, it doesn't mean that Krishna didn't go in every part of India, so he may not have gone up to the Indus Valley. We have no evidence of that.
The Pandavas' horses traveled.
The Pandavas and the kings traveled, and they went to different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And they conquered the different areas of the world, but that doesn't mean, if you read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, it explains about that. But that doesn't mean that the people in the Indus Valley civilization necessarily connected with Krishna when he was on the planet. He was in Vrindavan, Dwarka, Mathura. Those were the places he was in.
Yeah, but also like the size scale, because in Dwapara Yuga, then people were so much bigger. They're much bigger. But this scale of these towns that look